Welcome back. But don't scroll away, because what you're about to hear is not just a business story. This is a human story. This is the story of a boy who grew up watching his father break, who lived in small, crowded apartments, who learned early what it feels like to be invisible. And yet, that same boy would later help build one of the most loved brands on earth. Not just a coffee company, but a daily ritual for millions. His name is Howard Schultz. He wasn't born rich. He didn't inherit power. He didn't even start the company he would one day transform. He started with pain. Howard was born in 1953 and raised in a tough neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. His family lived in public housing, the kind of place where dreams feel dangerous because reality is so heavy. Money was always short. Stability didn't exist. Life was about survival, not ambition. His father worked low-paying jobs, delivery driver, factory worker, anything that kept food on the table. No benefits, no protection, no respect. One winter day, his father slipped on ice and injured his leg badly. That single fall destroyed everything. He lost his job. There was no health insurance, no compensation, no safety net. Howard watched a strong man become silent and defeated. Years later, he would say that moment shaped his entire life. He learned what it feels like to be treated like a number instead of a human being. That pain followed him everywhere. Howard was embarrassed to invite friends home. He shared cramped rooms, wore old clothes, and lived with the constant fear of falling further behind. Poverty didn't just affect his wallet, it lived in his mind. But instead of breaking him, it built something powerful inside him. Determination. Howard worked nonstop. He sold newspapers. He took small jobs. He played sports to stay focused and disciplined. And against every expectation, he became the first person in his family to attend college. Not an elite school. No shortcuts. He attended Northern Michigan University on a sports scholarship and worked side jobs just to survive. Every step forward felt earned the hard way. After graduation, he joined Xerox, where he discovered something important. He was good at selling. Really good. But deep down, he knew selling wasn't his dream. He wanted purpose. He wanted meaning. He wanted to build something that treated people better than the world had treated his father. That desire would soon lead him to a small coffee company in Seattle called Starbucks. At the time, it had just a few stores and sold only coffee beans. No one imagined it would change the world. But neither did anyone imagine what this poor boy from Brooklyn was about to do next. Howard had survived poverty. He had escaped invisibility. But his real battle was still ahead. A battle against rejection, doubt, and the people who would tell him, "This idea will never work." Howard Schultz didn't join Starbucks as a founder, an owner, or a visionary leader. He joined as an employee. At that time, Starbucks was a tiny Seattle-based business with just a few stores. It didn't sell drinks. No lattes, no cappuccinos, no cozy chairs. Just coffee beans, grinders, and equipment for people to brew at home. But for Howard, something felt different the moment he walked in. There was passion in the air. The employees cared deeply about quality. They spoke about coffee with respect, almost like it was art. Howard didn't just see products, he felt purpose. And slowly, a vision began forming in his mind. Then came 1983. Starbucks sent Howard on a business trip to Milan, Italy. It was supposed to be a simple work visit. Instead, it became the moment that changed his life. As Howard walked through the streets of Milan, he noticed something magical. Espresso bars everywhere. Crowded, noisy, alive. People weren't rushing in and out. They were standing, talking, laughing, connecting. The baristas knew customers by name. Coffee wasn't just a drink. It was a shared experience. Howard stood there watching, absorbing, dreaming. He didn't see coffee. He saw community. He saw belonging. He saw warmth. And he realized something powerful. America didn't have this. When he returned to Seattle, Howard was overflowing with excitement. He rushed into meetings and shared his idea with the Starbucks founders. "Let's serve coffee inside our stores," he said. "Let's create espresso bars. Let's build places where people come not just to drink, but to feel connected." He truly believed this was the future. But the response crushed him. The founders listened carefully, then said no. That's not who we are. Americans won't pay that much for coffee. People just want beans, not experiences. Howard felt invisible again, just like he had as a child. But this time something was different. He didn't let the rejection silence him. Instead, it clarified him. If they wouldn't build the dream, he would. Leaving Starbucks was the hardest decision of his life. He loved the company. He respected the founders. But his vision was bigger than comfort and loyalty. So in 1985, Howard walked away. No safety net, no rich family, no guaranteed success, just belief. He decided to start his own coffee company inspired by Italy. But belief alone doesn't pay rent. He needed money, and that meant pitching investors. What followed was brutal. Meeting after meeting, door after door, rejection after rejection. Americans won't pay $3 for coffee. This will never scale. You're dreaming. Howard later said he was rejected more than 200 times. But he kept going. Every no sharpened his purpose. Every rejection strengthened his resolve. Finally, a small group of investors believed in him. He raised enough money to open his first espresso bar in Seattle. It was small. It was risky. But it was real. And the moment the doors opened, people lined up. They didn't just buy coffee. They stayed. They talked. They came back. Howard had been right. The espresso bar succeeded. But just as Howard tasted victory, fate brought his biggest test yet. The chance to buy the very company that once rejected him. Howard Schultz had proven something important. People would pay more for coffee. Not because of the drink, but because of the feeling. His small espresso bar in Seattle was thriving. Customers returned again and again, not just for caffeine, but for connection. Baristas knew names. Music filled the room. The place felt alive. It was everything Howard had imagined while standing in the streets of Milan. But just when life seemed to be moving forward, something unexpected happened. The founders of Starbucks, the same people who once rejected his idea, decided they wanted to sell the company. Starbucks was still small. A few stores. Limited growth. No big future in their eyes. They were ready to move on. When Howard heard the news, his heart raced. This was the dream he never let go of. The company he loved. The vision he once begged them to believe in. Now it was for sale. There was only one problem. The price. To buy Starbucks, Howard needed nearly $4 million. Today that would be worth many times more. And Howard didn't have it. Not even close. Most people would have walked away. Howard didn't. He went back into battle. Once again, he sat across from investors. Once again, he explained his vision. And once again, many said no. You're asking for too much. This company is too small. Coffee is not a serious business. But this time, Howard wasn't pitching an idea. He was pitching proof. He showed sales numbers. He showed customer loyalty. He showed belief backed by reality. Slowly, doors began to open. Not all at once. Not easily. But finally, the money came together. In 1987, at just 34 years old, Howard Schultz bought Starbucks. He didn't just buy a company. He reclaimed his dream. What he inherited wasn't impressive on paper. Starbucks had only a handful of stores, a small roasting operation, and no clear identity. It didn't even sell brewed coffee yet. But Howard saw something no spreadsheet could show. Potential. Purpose. A chance to build the kind of company his father never had. One that respected people, protected workers, and created dignity through work. He became CEO and immediately began transforming Starbucks from the inside out. This wasn't about growth at all costs. It was about soul. Howard believed Starbucks could become a third place. Not home, not work, but somewhere in between. A place where people could pause, breathe, and feel human. He focused on details others ignored. How the store smelled. How the music sounded. How the chairs felt. How customers were greeted. Most importantly, how employees were treated. He didn't call them workers. He called them partners. Even part-time baristas received benefits and stock ownership, something unheard of in retail at the time. Howard believed one thing deeply. If you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers. And soon, the world would begin to notice. Howard had bought Starbucks, but now came the real challenge. turning a tiny coffee company into a culture that could scale without losing its soul. When Howard Schultz officially took control of Starbucks in 1987, he didn't inherit a powerhouse. He inherited a question. What is Starbucks supposed to be? At the time, Starbucks had only a few stores, no clear identity, and no experience for customers beyond buying beans. It wasn't losing money, but it wasn't inspiring anyone either. Many advisors told Howard to focus on efficiency, margins, and fast expansion. He ignored them. Howard believed Starbucks could become something entirely new. Not just a place to buy coffee, but a place to be. A third place between home and work, where people could slow down in a fast world. So he began redesigning everything. First, the stores. Gone were cold layouts and harsh lighting. In came warm colors, wooden textures, soft lights, and comfortable seating. Music played quietly in the background. The smell of coffee was protected like a sacred rule. No food was allowed to overpower it. Then came the drinks. Espresso-based beverages became the heart of the menu. Latte, cappuccino, mocha. Words most Americans had never spoken before suddenly became part of daily language. Starbucks didn't just sell coffee. It educated customers patiently, without judgment. Howard understood something most companies missed. People don't buy products. They buy feelings. He trained baristas not just to make drinks, but to make eye contact, smile, remember names, and create moments. Writing a name on a cup wasn't marketing, it was recognition. And then came the boldest move of all. Howard gave employees, even part-time ones, health insurance, stock options, and a sense of ownership. In the late 1980s, this was almost unheard of in retail. Wall Street didn't like it. Analysts warned him. Costs would rise. Profits would shrink. Howard didn't care. He had seen what happened to his father when workers were treated as disposable. Starbucks would be different. He called employees partners. Because he meant it. The culture strengthened. Growth followed naturally. Starbucks expanded carefully into cities like Chicago, Vancouver, and New York City. Howard refused to franchise aggressively. He wanted control, not power, but protection of the experience. Every new store had to feel like Starbucks. Not fast. Not cheap. But human. By the early 1990s, Starbucks had become more than a coffee chain. It was a lifestyle. Holding a Starbucks cup meant something. It signaled taste, calm, and a small moment of self-care. But with growth came pressure. Howard began to ask himself a dangerous question. Can something built on soul survive massive scale? Starbucks was growing fast. Maybe too fast. And soon, the very success Howard dreamed of would begin to threaten everything he built. By the early 1990s, Howard Schultz had done what many thought was impossible. Starbucks was no longer just a Seattle experiment. It was spreading across America. Stores were opening in major cities. Lines were forming every morning, and customers weren't complaining about the price. They were proud to pay it. Coffee had become culture. But Howard knew something important. Growth needs fuel. And to grow faster, Starbucks needed serious capital. In 1992, Howard made a bold and risky decision. He took Starbucks public on the NASDAQ. Many people warned him not to do it. Going public meant answering to shareholders. It meant pressure. It meant expectations. But Howard believed the company was ready. On the day of the IPO, Starbucks stock was priced at $17 per share. The valuation was around $250 million. For a company that once had 6 stores and no drinks on the menu, this was shocking. Wall Street loved the story. A premium brand. Loyal customers. Strong culture. The stock jumped. With fresh funding, Starbucks entered a new phase, rapid expansion. Stores opened faster than ever. Airports, downtown streets, suburbs, college towns. Starbucks became a daily habit for millions. People didn't say, "Let's get coffee." They said, "Let's go to Starbucks." Then something unexpected happened. In one California store, baristas began experimenting. Customers were asking for cold blended drinks. Something Starbucks didn't officially sell. Instead of waiting for permission, they tried new combinations. Espresso, milk, sweet flavors. When Howard tasted it, he didn't shut it down. He leaned in. That single experiment turned into one of the most successful products in company history and brought in a younger generation of customers. Starbucks wasn't just following culture anymore. It was creating it. By the late 1990s, the numbers were unbelievable. Thousands of stores, over $1 billion in annual revenue, locations across North America. Then came global expansion. Starbucks opened its first international store in Tokyo. Many doubted it would work. Different culture, different habits. They were wrong. Customers lined up. Starbucks became a symbol of modern lifestyle. From there, expansion spread to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But behind the success, Howard felt something shift. Some stores felt rushed. Some felt cold. Some felt corporate. The warmth was fading. Standardization was replacing soul. Howard began to worry. Had Starbucks grown too fast? Wall Street wanted more stores, more profit, more speed. But Howard wanted meaning. He didn't want Starbucks to become just another fast food chain. By 2000, exhausted and conflicted, Howard made a surprising move. He stepped down as CEO. He believed new leadership could take Starbucks higher financially, while he stayed back to protect the vision as chairman. At first, it worked. But deep inside, a storm was forming. Howard walked away from the CEO role. But what happened next would push Starbucks to the edge of collapse and force him to face the hardest decision of his life. When Howard Schultz stepped down as CEO in 2000, it shocked many people. Starbucks was winning. Starbucks had thousands of stores, rising profits, global expansion, and a powerful brand. From the outside, it looked unstoppable. But Howard felt something most people couldn't see. The soul was slipping. Howard stayed on as chairman while new CEOs took control of day-to-day operations. Their focus was clear: faster growth, higher efficiency, stronger numbers. And at first, the strategy worked. More stores opened. Revenue increased. Stock prices climbed. Wall Street was happy. But inside the stores, something subtle and dangerous was happening. Processes replaced passion. Speed replaced connection. Systems replaced stories. Automatic espresso machines were introduced. They were faster and more consistent, but they hid the craft. Customers could no longer see baristas pull shots by hand. The smell of fresh coffee weakened. Stores became louder, busier, more crowded. Starbucks was becoming efficient, but less human. Howard began quietly visiting stores around the country. He sat in corners. He watched. And what he saw worried him deeply. Baristas no longer made eye contact. Customers rushed in and out. The third place felt like a transaction. He once said, "We were losing the romance of coffee." At the same time, the company kept expanding aggressively. Stores opened on the same streets, sometimes across from each other. Growth was no longer thoughtful, it was aggressive. Then came 2007. The world changed. The global financial crisis hit hard. People lost jobs. Families cut expenses. Suddenly, a $4 coffee felt like a luxury many couldn't justify. Sales dropped. Customer visits slowed. Criticism exploded. Media headlines turned brutal. Starbucks is overpriced. Who needs fancy coffee in a recession? Has Starbucks lost its way? The stock price collapsed, falling nearly 80% in a short time. Billions in company value vanished. Hundreds of stores were forced to close. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Inside the company, morale was crushed. Howard watched all of this from the sidelines, heartbroken. This wasn't just a business problem. This was personal. Starbucks was built to honor people, customers and employees. Now people felt rushed, unseen, and disconnected. Howard knew the truth. If nothing changed, Starbucks could fail. In early 2008, the board of directors came to him with a simple but terrifying request. "Howard, we need you back." At 54 years old, during one of the worst economic crises in modern history, Howard Schultz agreed to return as CEO. Not to celebrate success, but to save a broken dream. He stood before his leadership team and said words that would define the comeback. "We are not in the coffee business serving people. We are in the people business serving coffee, and we forgot that. What came next would shock the business world. Howard is back in charge, and his first decisions will be painful, expensive, and ruthless. But they are the only way to bring Starbucks back to life. When Howard Schultz returned as CEO in 2008, he didn't pretend everything was fine. He faced the truth head-on. Starbucks was hurting. Financially, culturally, emotionally. The company had grown fast, but it had grown away from its soul. Howard knew one thing clearly: small changes would not fix big problems. So he chose the hardest path. The honest one. His first decisions shocked everyone. He announced the closure of hundreds of stores. Not just the ones losing money, but even some profitable locations that didn't reflect the Starbucks experience. For Howard, profit without purpose was failure. Then came layoffs. Thousands of jobs were cut. This broke his heart, but he believed that if the company didn't survive, everyone would lose their jobs. Leadership, he believed, meant making painful decisions early to prevent disaster later. Next, Howard did something no one expected. He shut down every Starbucks store in the United States for an entire day. Over 7,000 stores. Millions of dollars lost. Why? Training. Howard gathered every barista, every partner, and retrained them on espresso, customer connection, and pride in craft. This wasn't about speed. It was about respect for the drink and the customer. "We're not fixing coffee," he told them. "We're restoring belief." He removed practices that damaged the experience. Microwaved food that ruined the smell of coffee? Gone. Machines that hid the art of brewing? Replaced or redesigned. Stores that felt cold and rushed? Reimagined. Howard also led by example. He cut his own salary to $1. Not as a publicity stunt, but as a message. This is not about me. This is about saving us. Slowly, something changed. Baristas began making eye contact again. Customers stayed longer. Conversations returned. But Howard didn't stop there. He invested in the future. Starbucks introduced free Wi-Fi, turning stores into true third places for students, freelancers, and creators. The company launched mobile ordering and loyalty programs that made Starbucks part of customers' daily rhythm without losing warmth. He doubled down on values. Ethical sourcing. Fair pay for farmers. Sustainability. Diversity and inclusion. Howard believed a company could be profitable and responsible. And then the results started showing. Sales stabilized. Customer trust returned. Employee pride grew. Starbucks wasn't just surviving. It was healing. Howard often visited stores quietly, sitting in corners watching moments happen again. A barista remembering a name, a free refill for a regular, a smile that meant "I see you." That's when he knew. The soul was coming back. The comeback was real, but could Starbucks rise higher than ever before, or would the scars of the crisis return to haunt it? The comeback of Howard Schultz was not loud. It wasn't flashy. It was disciplined, focused, and deeply human. After the painful reset, Starbucks slowly began to breathe again. Customers returned, not because prices dropped, but because the feeling came back. The stores felt warmer. The coffee tasted better. The conversations felt real. People weren't just buying drinks again. They were reclaiming a ritual they had missed. By 2009 and 2010, the numbers started telling a new story. Revenue climbed back into the billions. Profits returned. The stock price recovered dramatically. But Howard paid attention to something more important than charts. Employee pride. Baristas stood taller. They spoke with confidence again. They weren't just rushing through orders, they were creating moments. Howard believed that when employees feel respected, customers feel it instantly. And then Starbucks entered a new era. Technology. Instead of fighting it, Howard embraced it carefully. Mobile payments, digital rewards, and app-based ordering were introduced. Not to replace human interaction, but to remove friction. Faster service meant more time for connection, not less. The Starbucks Rewards program exploded in popularity, turning occasional visitors into loyal daily customers. The app became one of the most used mobile payment systems in the United States. Yet Howard never forgot the lesson of the past. Growth without values was dangerous. So Starbucks expanded again, but smarter. International markets were chosen carefully. Stores were adapted to local cultures instead of forcing one global identity. In every country, the same question guided decisions. Does this feel human? Starbucks also leaned harder into purpose. The company invested heavily in ethical sourcing, ensuring coffee farmers were treated fairly. Sustainability programs reduced waste and supported environmental responsibility. Starbucks committed to hiring veterans, refugees, and people from underserved communities. Howard often said, "Success is meaningless if you don't share it." By the mid-2010s, Starbucks wasn't just recovered. It was respected. Business schools studied it. Leaders quoted it. Customers trusted it. What once looked like a fallen giant had become a symbol of how values-driven leadership could win, even in a ruthless market. Howard would sometimes walk into a random store, order a simple coffee, and sit quietly. He watched students studying, friends talking, strangers sharing tables. He heard laughter. He felt calm. This was the dream. Not domination. Not ego, but belonging. The company that almost lost its soul had found it again, and this time, it knew how fragile it was. Starbucks was back on top. But Howard knew his journey wasn't just about business anymore. It was about legacy, leadership, and what comes after success. By the mid-2010s, Howard Schultz had done what few leaders ever do. He didn't just build Starbucks. He lost it. And then he brought it back. Stronger, wiser, and more human. The company was thriving again. Thousands of stores across the world. Loyal customers. Strong profits. A respected culture. From the outside, it looked like the perfect time to celebrate. But Howard wasn't celebrating. He was reflecting. He had spent decades carrying Starbucks on his shoulders. Every decision, every store, every crisis. And now he was asking himself a difficult question. What does leadership look like after success? Howard believed true leadership wasn't about control. It was about stewardship, protecting something so it could live beyond you. He didn't want Starbucks to depend on him forever. He wanted it to stand on its values, even when he was gone. So in 2017, Howard made another major decision. He stepped down as CEO, this time by choice, not exhaustion or crisis. He passed daily leadership to a new generation, confident that the culture had roots deep enough to survive. He remained involved, but no longer at the center. To him, this wasn't stepping away. It was stepping back so others could step forward. But Howard didn't slow down. He shifted his focus from managing a company to expanding impact. He poured energy into social responsibility. Starbucks increased programs for employee education, offering college opportunities to workers who never imagined higher education was possible. Veterans were hired. Refugees were welcomed. Communities were supported. Howard believed businesses should be platforms for dignity, not just profit. He spoke openly about inequality, opportunity, and the responsibility of corporations to lead with conscience. Some criticized him, others admired him, but Howard had never been driven by approval. He was driven by memory. The memory of his father sitting injured and helpless. The memory of workers being ignored. The memory of feeling invisible. Starbucks had become his answer to that pain. And now, his role was to protect that answer, not as a boss, but as a guardian of values. Howard once said, "The biggest risk we ever took was believing people mattered." Looking at Starbucks now, it was clear. That belief paid off. The company had become more than a brand. It was a habit, a safe space, a pause in the noise of life. For millions of people, Starbucks wasn't just coffee. It was comfort. And Howard knew his journey wasn't about ending on top. It was about leaving something behind that could still care when he wasn't there. Howard steps away from the spotlight, but his story isn't finished yet. Because now comes the most important question of all. What legacy does a life of leadership truly leave behind? When Howard Schultz stepped away from the CEO role, many assumed his story had reached its final chapter. They were wrong. Howard didn't measure success by titles anymore. He measured it by impact. By what remained when he wasn't in the room. By whether the values he fought for could survive without his voice reminding people of them. And the truth was clear. Starbucks had become something rare in modern business. A global company built on emotional connection. Not perfect, not flawless, but intentional. Howard often spoke about the idea of human dignity in business. To him, leadership was not about winning markets. It was about honoring people, employees, customers, farmers, communities. He believed profit should be the result of doing things right, not the excuse to do things wrong. That belief shaped decisions long after he stepped down. Starbucks continued expanding education benefits for employees, continued investing in ethical sourcing, continued treating partners as stakeholders, not expenses, continued choosing long-term trust over short-term applause. Howard watched all of this quietly. Sometimes, he would visit a store unannounced, sit with a coffee, observe. He looked for small signs, a barista helping a confused customer, a manager listening patiently, a moment of kindness between strangers. Those moments mattered more to him than quarterly earnings. Because legacy isn't built in boardrooms, it's built in everyday behavior. Howard understood something most leaders never do. You don't own a culture. You serve it. And if you serve it well, it outlives you. People often asked him what he was most proud of. It wasn't the valuation. It wasn't the number of stores. It wasn't global recognition. It was this: that a company could grow massive and still try to stay kind. That a kid from public housing could change how the world treats workers. That a cup of coffee could become a symbol of connection instead of consumption. Howard once said, "In the end, we're not remembered for what we built, but for how we made people feel." And that sentence may be the truest summary of his life. Starbucks became a place where millions start their mornings. Tired, hopeful, stressed, dreaming. And for a few minutes, they feel seen. That feeling didn't happen by accident. It was designed with intention, empathy, and memory. Howard didn't erase his past. He transformed it into purpose. The story of Starbucks is powerful, but the real lesson begins now. Because the final chapters aren't about Howard anymore. They're about what you can take from his journey. The journey of Howard Schultz is more than a story about coffee. It's a story about resilience, vision, and purpose. Howard grew up in poverty. He watched his father suffer without support. He felt invisible. And yet, he refused to let those circumstances define him. That pain became fuel, a compass pointing him towards something greater than himself. There are key lessons hidden in his life that anyone can use. 1. Your past doesn't define you. Howard came from public housing with no money, no connections, and no privilege. Yet he built a global brand that touches millions. Your beginnings don't limit your endings. 2. Rejection is a stepping stone. Howard was turned down over 200 times before investors believed in his coffee dream. Each no was preparation for the eventual yes. 3. Lead with heart, not just strategy. Profit matters, but people matter more. Howard never forgot that every employee, customer, or farmer is a human being, not a number. 4. Your business can heal, not just sell. Starbucks wasn't just a coffee chain. It was a response to pain, the pain he saw in his father and in workers. Howard designed dignity into every decision. 5. Vision is more than a goal. Howard didn't just want Starbucks to be big. He wanted it to be meaningful. To survive challenges, a company must have a soul, not just a balance sheet. These lessons aren't limited to business. They apply to leadership, personal growth, and life itself. Howard Schultz's story shows that hardship can be a teacher, rejection can be fuel, and purpose can outlast every crisis. Howard once said, "Dream more than others think practical. Care more than others think wise. Expect more than others think possible. And don't be afraid to be the only one who believes." That mindset is what built Starbucks. But it's not exclusive to CEOs. It's for anyone who refuses to give up on a dream, anyone willing to take bold steps when the world says it can't be done. Howard turned coffee into culture, pain into purpose, and rejection into momentum. Now, the final part asks the most important question. If one man could do this, what can you do with your life? Howard Schultz's journey didn't end with billions, global expansion, or even accolades. His journey ended, if it ever ends, with impact. From a boy in the Bayview projects, watching his father struggle, to a man shaping the daily lives of millions worldwide, Howard's life teaches a powerful lesson. Your circumstances do not determine your future. Your choices do. Howard didn't wait for comfort. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for the world to notice. He acted, failed, learned, and acted again. Every rejection, every setback, every moment of doubt became fuel for persistence. He turned a personal pain into a universal answer. That answer was Starbucks. Not just a coffee shop, but a culture of care, connection, and dignity. And here's the ultimate takeaway. If one boy from public housing could transform an industry and create a legacy that thousands of employees, millions of customers, and even entire communities benefit from, imagine what you could do. Your dream doesn't need approval. Your effort doesn't need applause. The world doesn't have to recognize it first, it only needs you to start. Howard once said, "Dream more than others think practical. Care more than others think wise. Expect more than others think possible." Every cup of coffee, every thoughtful decision, every moment of empathy built something far greater than revenue or reputation. He believed that true leadership is measured by how many lives you lift along the way. Today, Starbucks still thrives. Millions of people start their day with a cup of coffee that represents more than taste. It represents warmth, community, and respect. And Howard's story lives on in every interaction, every ritual, and every small gesture inside a Starbucks store. But the story doesn't end with him. It continues with every person inspired to act, to create, to lead with heart. This is your invitation. Take your pain, your doubts, your no's, and turn them into fuel. Build, lead, care, persist. You may not start a coffee empire, but you can start something that matters, something that lifts people, something that outlives you. That is the real legacy. That is the Howard Schultz lesson. So, when you feel small, invisible, or powerless, remember he once felt the same. And he didn't give up. Your story starts now. No excuses. No waiting. Just start. Build. Believe. Begin. Because if a boy from the projects could change the world through coffee, you can change your world too. The end.